Well, a win's a win, and so in some regard, you don't want to overdo it, right? There are always ways you can win games and lose games, and you can overanalyze it. You can dissect it however you want. At the end of the day, the goal is to win. But Ryan Day regularly talks about leaving no doubt, and there is a couple of things. I should say there are a couple of things with this Ohio State team that I think they're not leaving doubt with. And there are plenty of things with this team right now that have me scratching my head going, gee, I don't know. Maybe the Buckeyes aren't quite as good as we thought they were going to be. We got a lot more to dive into than just the final scores. The Buckeyes beat the Nebraska Cornhuskers here on Saturday afternoon. It's our post-game edition, instant analysis on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Horseshoe. Instant analysis after Ohio State's win over the Nebraska Cornhuskers that had a lot of pretty nervous Buckeye fans late in the game. Brendan Gulick from home, Anthony Moeglin on site. Anthony, it's a weird game. 21-17. I thought coming into the season that Nebraska was probably going to be an upper half of the Big Ten kind of challenge, and I thought this would be a good game. And then they got embarrassed last week, and I thought, well, maybe not so much. Perhaps this should be a game the Buckeyes will take care of business. And this thing turned into a much, much closer game for one reason and one reason only, in my opinion. Ohio State has a glaring problem right now up front. The offensive line is not good.
Yeah, it's not good, and today was one of their worst performances, and it makes sense because you lose your first round or potential first round pick, Josh Simmons, to injury last week, and Zed Mikulski stepped in, and it was very evident that there was a backup there playing left tackle. And even at the end of the game there, Mikulski goes down with a big injury, and we don't know the status of him. Coach Day didn't want to comment on it quite yet, so we don't know how serious it is. But now Ohio State's got an even bigger question mark on their offensive line, especially after a day where you didn't look good. You couldn't run the football. You couldn't protect. And up front, they were kind of getting bullied from start to finish today. So it is a question mark is a really good way to say it. I think it's a place of serious concern on this Ohio State roster.
It might be more of an exclamation point than a question mark. Ohio State, last year they had 3 instances where they did not achieve 100 yards rushing in a game. And in 2 of those instances, they were able to overcome it, and they won anyways. And then obviously the last game of the season, the Missouri game, is a game that Buckeye fans don't really like to talk about because it was a bad day on a lot of fronts. But the thing that stood out to me most in that Missouri game was this offensive line needs a massive overhaul. And again, Ohio State won today. Okay, I'm not ignoring the fact that Will Howard largely had a really good day, and that Jeremiah Smith scored another big touchdown over the middle of the field, and that the Buckeye defense played outstanding. But this team measures itself on championships. All they talk about is beat the team up north, win the Big Ten title, get to the playoff, win the national championship. Everybody is back here to win a national title. And what we've seen now, 2 games in a row, with a bye week in the middle, is not good enough.
Well,
they lost to Oregon, and you could easily argue they should have lost this game today.
Well, you should have. If your defense doesn't play superhero ball throughout the entire game, you lose this football game. And it's not close, really. You probably lose it by 2 scores, maybe by 10 points, I would say. But Brennan, the really discouraging part for me is that sometimes these things happen, right, where there's a team that comes in and kind of shocks you, right? You think back to some years in the past, maybe that Michigan State game, maybe that Purdue game a few years back, where it was a fluke, and then you answer it and you continue forward. But today didn't feel very fluky. Today felt like 2 evenly matched teams kind of going back and forth. And it was like Nebraska couldn't get it really going on offense, but when they did, it got really uneasy in here, especially towards the end of the game when they started putting drives together, because Ohio State on the flip side in the second half couldn't move the football at all. And it was like a very uneasy thing. And for that to be, it felt right. Like it was the way that this game was supposed to go between two evenly matched teams. It didn't feel like Nebraska came in here and hit a bunch of trick plays and accidentally was in the football game. No, they deserve to be in that football game. And frankly, they deserve to win the football game. It took a Herculean effort from this Ohio State defense to make sure that didn't happen. But man, there's a lot. There's film this week isn't going to be fun for the Buckeyes. I can tell you that much.
Listen, the reason why they looked like they were going to win this game, they played the way Michigan has played against Ohio State the last few years.
Yeah.
They kicked Ohio State's butt in the trenches for a good chunk of the game. I thought the Buckeye defensive line was better than it was against Oregon, but still not quite enough. And it wasn't just a left tackle problem. Austin Searveld at right guard did not play well. I mean, Ohio State right now, and it's like, I don't know what you're going to do about it mid-season, because you can't just go sign a free agent. That's off.
You can't make a trade. Yeah.
But the lack of recruiting and the lack of development of what you've got on the offensive line, it ain't cutting it. Every other position on this team, every other position group might have, a chink in the armor here or there, but largely rock solid. I don't feel that way about this offensive line. And, the good news is you've got unbelievable skill position players that can help you get past that and mask some of those things. But what was painfully obvious today? On a 4th and 1, when Ohio State had to have a first down, they ran out of the shotgun and threw the ball.
Yeah.
That is mystifying. That is alarming. That is pull the alarm bell, break glass in case of emergency. Terrible.
And I'm not going to make
1 yard at home.
And I'm not going to make you feel better, because you go back to the first quarter of the game when they did run the ball from under center and on 4th and 1 and 4th and less than 1 on a drive that started on the plus side of the 50, because you had a bad punt, like an opportunity to just put the game away and do what Indiana did to Nebraska. You had the chance to do it. And on 4th and 1, you hand it to Travion and he goes backwards 2 yards. When's the last time Travion Henderson has gone negative 2 yards? Well, 2 weeks ago out in Oregon was a couple of those examples, because going backwards is not the way that we're used to seeing this Ohio State run game go. Like, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are two of the best running backs in all of America. And today they combined for 54 yards. Like, that just cannot happen. That can't happen.
Not good enough. I mean, listen, I know the offensive line has looked better this year than it did last year. I'm willing to concede that. Seth McLaughlin's played really well. Donovan Jackson, in my opinion, looks significantly better. And Josh Simmons was playing well, but he's done. He's out. And their lack of depth is alarming. If you want to win a national championship, you got to figure it out right now. And they're about to play a Penn State team that's for real. And that program feels like they owe Ohio State one, because the Buckeyes have had their number for a long time. We're showing you a box score here on screen, but a couple of other numbers today that stand out. 1 of 10 on third downs, Ohio State today. 1 for 10. They only had 11 first downs all game. I mean, it's not even close to being good enough. The Buckeyes ran 19 fewer plays than Nebraska. Only 47 offensive plays in this game. Now, some of that's because they hit a couple of explosives. You'll take that. Carnell Tate had a 40-yard catch. Jeremiah obviously had the 60-yard touchdown. But Quinshon Judkins, 10 carries for 29 yards. Trey had 10 carries for 25 yards. It's not a running back problem. It's not a vision problem. It's not a running back physicality problem. They no push, none. Will Howard, I thought, played a solid game today. I know he threw an interception, but 13 of 16 for 221 and 3 touchdowns. He read the defense well. I thought he largely played fine, but this was a Nebraska team that had Ohio State on the ropes.
Yeah, and I think, too, I'm going to write about it a little bit later on our website, si.com/college/Ohio State. And I think that Will Howard's put two really, really good football games together in a game that you lose in Oregon and a game today where you potentially should have lost. But I think Will Howard's playing very good football. He talked in his post-game presser, which you can catch on our YouTube page here. But he had mentioned, like, he says all the right things. Like, this is an A+ kind of a guy. He says all the right things. I need to be better. I need to do more. It's on me. I'm the quarterback. But he's playing good football. And if it wasn't for him today, it took a huge drive at the end of the game to take the lead. But it also took really good play in the first half. That throw to Carnell was really, really good. He talks about it, and he's right. If you can't tell behind me, it's pretty windy down here on the field. And that one to Carnell, he kind of let it up, or kind of got stuck up in the air, had to bring it back, made the catch a little tougher than it needed to be. But the one to Jeremiah was everything we've been looking for from Will Howard. Like, throw the deep ball and get a lot better doing so. It was a perfect ball to Jeremiah. He made a decision early in his drop back, and he delivered a great shot to one of the best receivers in the country. And, like, he's playing really good. The receivers I thought today were incredible. Carnell Tate was a guy I wanted to get to. You saw it on the screen a minute ago. 7 catches for over 100 yards and that one score. This was his first game where he got to show what he can do. And, like, everyone forgets about it because on the left of him is Emeka Ibuka, and on the right of him is Jeremiah Smith. And Carnell Tate would start anywhere else in the country, like any other program in the country, he'd be a number one. But today he showed that, and he was fantastic today. Emeka did what he needed to do, especially in some big-time situations, and Jeremiah as well. So, like, everywhere on offense was good outside of the running game and outside of the offensive line. I thought that was obviously the big point of emphasis today.
And listen, I'm not sitting here trying to be like a complete and total alarmist. And the Buckeyes don't stink. Okay. I'm reacting based on their own measurement of their own goals and aspirations. This is a team with an insane amount of talent, insane. And many of those guys made really good plays today. Let's talk defense for a second and give those guys their flowers. 3 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. Cody Simon said he felt personally responsible for the team's loss at Oregon, and he played like it today. 8 tackles, 3 TFLs, 4 solo tackles. I thought when the game was, in its most critical moments late, when Ohio State needed to basically say, hey, we got a 4-point lead, we got to protect this thing, Cody Simon played with his hair on fire. He was awesome. Tyleik Williams looked really good. I kind of liked what I saw from Edric Houston when he came in and played on the interior of the defensive line. Caleb Downs, I thought, had a pretty good game. All in all, JT Tuimoloau, really nice effort today. I liked what I saw defensively, and obviously, this was a solid step in the right direction for a group that only allowed 1 touchdown, coming off of a game against a dynamic offense in Oregon. They needed a get-right game, and they did a good job holding Oregon to some field goals. Obviously, one of those was a super long kick. The defense played winning football today, and the offense, I thought, largely played winning football in spurts. Like 5 3-and-outs is hard to ignore when you only have 11 drives total. When you start playing good teams like Penn State, let's just look at his recent history. Ohio State, the last 2 years against Penn State, has not run the football for 100 yards. They're not running the football very well right now. And again, it's not a running back problem. So how is that going to suddenly get better in 7 days when you go play probably the best Penn State team they've had in a long, long time? Like, you got a really small window to get this right.
And I would say this kind of to your point earlier of, like, how do you fix this? Well, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but a way you can kind of Band-Aid it and mask it is to have the best defense in the country, which we saw rear its head today, because Tyleik Williams said it afterwards in his press conference, and he's like, "Yeah, we believe we're the best defense in the country. We didn't show it last week, but today we did show it." And there's two areas, or one guy in one sequence I want to talk about. A guy that we haven't really talked about to this point, but defensive end Kenyatta Jackson. I thought he had a stretch in the second half, or in the first half, excuse me. I believe it was in the second quarter, where he had his half sack and he also had a TFL mixed in there, and it was just like a couple big plays that, hey, maybe he wasn't making the impact plays the entire time. But when he came in, 97 certainly stands out like a sore thumb. It's hilarious to stand next to him on the field because he's just massive. He's a big dude. But I thought he made some great plays, and I wanted to shout him out specifically. But the sequence that saved the game and saved the season, truthfully, is when Will Howard throws an interception. Nebraska returns it to the 7-yard line. They have all the momentum. They just kicked a field goal. Things aren't going well. This stadium is anxious. The boo birds are starting to come. And what does Ohio State do? They just make one play at a time, and they strung 4 of them together. And on 4th and 1, Cody said it perfectly. He goes, you could give us this much space on the field and say, hey, you got to defend it. And us 11 guys, we believe we have the ability to do that. And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what we did on that 4th and 1 when they stuffed the runner who tried to jump over the goal line and kept him out of the end zone. And that ends up being the difference in the football game. That sequence right there saves your season, and you do it in a big way. I thought Cody Simon and this defense there's not enough superlatives to say how they played today.
Yeah, I mean, the whole one blade of grass thing, like they exemplified that regularly. And the tone that I was trying to strike is the idea that this defense rebounded the way it needed to, but offensively, I think there is a major problem looming, and the Buckeyes are running out of time to get it right.
Yeah, no question about it. And it's like your backs are against the wall now. You have 5 football games left. You have 2 opportunities. Well, you got one next week where you have to, any way possible, whatever you have to do to score more points than Penn State, you just got to do it. And then you go Purdue, Northwestern, where you have to, and no disrespect to those programs, but you have to use those 2 weeks to figure it out. Whatever the problem is, you got to figure it out, because then you go Indiana, Michigan to finish it off. And who knows, Indiana may be a top 5 team in the country at that point.
Yeah, and I don't mean to cut you off. We called this a 3-game season at the beginning of the year. Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. And as the season is progressing, the Michigan game matters because it's the rivalry game. But it's almost feeling like it's still a 3-game season, but that it's turning into Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, because Indiana has a fighting chance of being undefeated going into that game.
And they are a fun team to watch.
They good.
Score more points. Yeah, they're the best scoring team in the country. And the team we just played today, they boat raced just 7 days ago. I mean, I don't know, Brendan, maybe it's me kind of overhyping it, and I've talked about it in our shows all week this week, but that was kind of looming in my head as like, not only do you have to win this football game, but since Indiana's playing such good football, everybody tonight probably, are going to compare Ohio State to Indiana, apples to apples right away, and say, this game in a couple of weeks is going to be circled now, because Indiana, if you're going the transitive property there, they are outplayed and are maybe potentially better than Ohio State.
It's hard to know for sure. I mean, I think Ohio State's got better athletes. Mm-hmm. But what Kurt Cignetti's doing right now in Bloomington is amazing. And I'll tell you one thing about that guy. I will never forget the way he said it at Big Ten Media Day. But I felt like this about him for a while. He just wins everywhere he goes. The guy just wins. And so there's something to be said for playing for a coach who you believe and in a culture with the right scheme where you're like, hey, listen, this is going to work, because it works for these guys over and over and over again. And all of a sudden he's resurrected a program that hasn't been relevant in football in a long time. And I realized they had a good run with Michael Penix at quarterback and gave Ohio State a little bit of a scare in the COVID year, but they've never been this good. I shouldn't say never. It's been a really long time, like 6 years or something, since Indiana has been, this good. And, all of a sudden that is looming to me as a little bit of a scary game on the schedule, as ridiculous as that sounds.
And that's 3 weeks after next week, right? Like, next week is going to be all eyes on Happy Valley next Saturday at noon, because that is going to be one where you're going over there, and this is Penn State's best opportunity to beat up Big Brother. Like, Ohio State year after year after year goes over there, or Penn State comes here and just breaks the hearts of the Nittany Lions, whether it be the perfect JT Barrett fourth quarter a few years ago on this field, or if it's JT Tuimoloau putting on his Superman cape and just winning a football game a couple years back. Like, they can't get over the hump, and they're going to be, after this Wisconsin game, they're flipping their attention on their plane ride home to get after Ohio State next week.
And you know what? They can run the football really, really well.
And we saw it, and Brendan, we saw it today in the second half. Whatever Nebraska did at halftime to switch up their scheme, they started running it a little bit better. And that's going to be a problem for Ohio State's defense if you can consistently run it against them, because that is where they're really, really good. And if Penn State is able to do that next week, it's going to be a really big challenge for that defense.
Ohio State has better skill position players than basically any team in the country. I think they would feel confident. I'm confident saying that if it's a 7-on-7 football game, give me the Bucks every day, every time. But you don't play 7-on-7 football. That's not how it goes. And Ohio State has to figure it out in the trenches. I think they took a good step forward on the defensive line this week. They created more pressure. They had a boatload of tackles for loss. Again, 13 tackles for loss over 66 plays. That's about 20% of your defensive snaps wind up in a TFL. You'll take that. That's really good. And 3 sacks, good move in the right direction there. The lingering problem with Ohio State from the moment they opened training camp was, what is this offensive line going to look like? And to Josh Simmons' credit, he had played a lot better this year, and it stinks that he's hurt and he's done for the year. The Buckeyes have to figure it out. Somebody else has to step in. And right now, Ryan Day, wouldn't commit to what that option was in the postgame press conference. I don't blame him. But maybe Donovan Jackson has to bump out to tackle. Maybe you see Luke Montgomery playing left guard next week. Austin Searveld has got to play better. I thought Josh Fryer today was okay. I don't know that I put a ton into PFF grades, but I am very interested to see how they grade out Ohio State's offensive line play this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's just from the eye test, right? We all watched it. I watched it live. Everyone who's watching this show right now had their eyes on it. And too many times, Ohio State offensive lineman had their back on the ground, and a Nebraska guy was getting home. And that's just enough. That's the least technical way to say it was bad from start to finish. And they have a lot of questions to answer up front.
All right. Who's your player of the game?
Player of the game? Wow, this is a good question. I think, on the offensive side of the football, it's Carnell Tate. I think that there was a number of different ways that this game could have gone if Ohio State's offense also wasn't clicking totally. The run game wasn't getting going, but if the pass game in the first half wasn't any good, Ohio State would have been in a world of hurt. And Will Howard's numbers at halftime, he was 9 for 9, 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. A lot of that was thanks to Carnell Tate. And it's just, to me, it's the story of a guy who, today was his opportunity, and what did he do with his opportunity? He took advantage of it. And opportunities in that room are hard to come by. He certainly took advantage of it and his chance. And then on the defensive side, it's Cody Simon. I mean, yes, the numbers were fantastic. Yes, he was very clearly the MVP of the game on defense. But hearing the way the rest of the team talks about him as the block O, as the leader, as the guy everybody looks to, I think just adds to that. And you saw it was evident today. Ohio State needed a victory. They needed to play good on defense, and it was going behind number 0 there, Cody Simon.
Yeah, I thought he played great too. The only other person I would call out on a game MVP kind of level to me is Will Howard. In not even a statistical sense for me, it was his ability to rebound and lead this group after he was hammered on social media. And it sounded like he stayed off of social media for a couple of weeks. The thing that everybody's going to remember about the Oregon game is him sliding as time expired, not getting a chance to run that final play and try to win the game. But I thought he played winning football for the vast majority of that game at Oregon. And it's really hard to be the quarterback at Ohio State. It is a very difficult thing to do. And that was the first time that he was dealt a significant body blow. And I loved the way he responded today. I loved his composure. I loved how accurate he was with the football, still making good throws all over the field. It is extremely obvious that he is capable of doing this. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee you're going to go out and win every game that you play, but he has what it takes to lead this team to where they want to go. And in his first opportunity since having, one of the most disappointing moments of his career, and I'll never forget seeing him sitting on the field at Autzen Stadium hands on the side of his helmet, realizing time expired and there was no opportunity left. I loved the way he responded today. And as a Pennsylvania kid, you heard it at the end of the press conference today. I don't know if I'd have said it quite the way he did, but I love it. Will's pretty excited to be going to play in Happy Valley next week.
He sure is, man. That fired me up. I kind of was like, I had my head down. I was typing. I was getting stuff prepped for our show. And he's like, yeah, it's a homecoming for me. He goes, they didn't recruit me. I wasn't good enough for them then. We're going to go over there and see if they were right. Whoa,
sitting down looking at your keyboard and you look up and you're like, what did he just say?
Whoa, yeah. I said, okay, all righty, let's go, man. I was ready to run through a wall. I'll tell you that much.
It was great. It was great. All right, plenty more coverage from Ohio State's win, 21-17 over the Nebraska Cornhuskers, available for you over at si.com/college/Ohio State. Bucks get it done in a sloppy game, but ultimately good enough. They did get on the scoreboard late in the fourth quarter and won the game 21-17 after being blanked in the third quarter and largely struggled in the second half offensively, but good enough to push their record to 6-1 on the season and hand Nebraska a second consecutive loss. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit here postgame. Can't wait to see you tomorrow as we break down some film and do a little bit more deep dive on what happened here with the Buckeyes win over the Cornhuskers. See you soon. Thanks for joining us here on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.